Everybody, this is of Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel and video game news. Today is Friday, April 12th. Let's see, everything is messed up here. There is definitely something weird about the menu layouts of OBS when you try to run two versions of it at the same time. The menus just like to move around, and the settings seem to not really lock in and stay consistent. It's probably time to update to a newer version, I'd guess. OBS is the one software that I try to stay a little bit further behind and not just play the newest, absolute newest version of the software. That way it hopefully would still be usable in case any bugs get introduced. So let's see, Yu-Gi-Oh! Here has new welcome gym packs, a new selection pack called Nightmare Arrives, and a total of 5 types of secret packs, including the new secret pack like Rescue Team Emergency Dispatch. Which seems to me like they're just introducing new secret packs. And nothing else really. Then they've introduced even more accessories, pointless things you can buy. So to the shop, let's see how many of these are even new or even available at the moment. You have something closer to a live 2D character than what you typically tend to see in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh! Has been more natural color palettes with 3D looking CGI models, where this is probably still technically 3D, but from every angle it's trying to look like a 2D image. And yeah, it is definitely just way too late to introduce something like that into Yu-Gi-Oh! Here in contrast, you can see this as fantasy character with colorfulness to it, but certainly muted, darker color palettes and more shadowing and angles, not having a thick black line on the outline like you would see typically in a 2D animated thing. Let's see what else. We have a field part that doesn't look like much. Yeah, I would hate to find how much gems I've actually wasted just to own everything. Here we have a protector, which isn't even really being shown particularly well. Like there really isn't a great zoomed in and aligned image here. So, and there's definitely room for at least a third screenshot that would just be a generic image. And we have what looks like a new wallpaper referencing something that I don't recognize at all as far as one of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Expansions. Let's see. Then Nightmare Pack arrives, or Nightmare Arrivals, I guess is the actual name. Let's see, is this even a candidate to open card packs? It is. You're missing enough rares and super rares and ultra rares for it to make sense. How many gems do we have? Enough. So let's go ahead and just purchase this, and of course inherently this is going to give us secret packs, more for 24 hours. Imagine, none of which I really care about. And I would assume that it's not even really worth your time to come back and look at this a second time, because while we are mostly full with the normals and rares, there's still an argument to make at least another 10 pack purchase. We're obviously chasing every single ultra rares, not a great plan. And a significant amount of all of these cards, regardless of what new secret pack they make or new cards they add to old secret packs, are going to end up having way more than 3 copies, most of which you cannot dissolve into crafting points, which just has severely undercut the level of importance of the crafting game mechanic in this game. They basically don't want you to be able to craft cards in this game because they so underemphasize it. And see, now that feels like that's not a good candidate to open more packs, even though there are some cards that you have only 1 copy of. There's too many cards in the rares and super rares and higher levels here that you already have 1 copy of. Of course, then that gives you the secret packs, which apparently this is new, so I have a 1 pack free pool, either because I just found it or because of them just giving everybody a 1 pack free pool. But even in a 1 pack free pool, like, these are just regular cards. They aren't special from the secret pack. And so this is about the maximum amount of cards I would be willing to look at if it was a much more rare occasion that I got cards at all. I almost would like to see a reboot of Yu-Gi-Oh! I mean, definitely that's what needs to happen, is that there needs to be a reboot of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Card game with considerably fewer cards, where cards are just way more important. Memento Mori, the mobile game I'm playing, does put an interesting perspective on that, in that it really is about only 36 collectible characters in Memento Mori a year and a half into the game existing. And so when you do pull characters, you're just getting a lot of copies of the same characters to feed into each other, whereas Yu-Gi-Oh! Has no aspect digitally to do that, really, except for maybe you could turn cards into crafting points and then use the crafting points to then craft something different, but that only really would work still if there was considerably fewer cards. There's just too much trash. Same problem with Yu-Gi-Oh! Too. I mean, Magic the Gathering Arena is what I meant to say there. It definitely would make a lot of sense for Magic the Gathering Arena to, in the digital form, allow you to craft cards a lot easier and have a lot less trash cards. I really have to ask, what is the point here of having 3 selection packs or secret packs introduced at the exact same time, when there's just been such a long drought of secret packs otherwise? Maybe you should just stagger the release of cards in the digital form versus the real world form, just so you can release things more systematically on a better schedule. Like, I kind of get where physically, maybe you've got to shove out card expansions all at the same day at the same time, but digitally it's just a different experience, particularly when you start to think about how it is a much easier sell to tell people to log into Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel than it is to tell people to go down to your local store or your card shop whatever and buy packs. I seriously doubt Yu-Gi-Oh! Really cares to maintain or help the comic book shops, the card shops, anymore, if they ever did. Inherently, that is the problem with running a card shop or a comic book shop, those kinds of shops, is that almost every big player in those industries is only trying to exploit the shop owner. They definitely aren't really helping the shop owners much. Which, yeah. That's a problem. Wow, I have like... a lot of cards. I may not be really looking at these correctly. Anyways, well, that's it for card pack opening for a while. We need to earn some more gold, more diamonds, whatever, to purchase more cards later. And unfortunately, that's just where it always goes. I guess I could have gone into the deck and seen what that would have given me for crafting points. It wouldn't have really changed much, but at no point do I feel like I want to spend the extra time to try and find a deck and build a deck with new cards. I didn't even look at the cards, so how can I be excited or know what new technique would happen with the cards? That is perhaps in part a personal problem of mine, because when I'm playing most games, once I get a team, I just want to keep that team. And so I would like to see more games accommodate that and just say, you know what, you found your favorites early, stick with it. Maybe every now and then you'll change things. Marvel Snap very much tried to force people with daily quests to change into completely different decks, and perhaps that's better for the education of the player in the long run, but also it's just kind of annoying. I think that happens fairly often even in the real world of card games too. Like, you're only going to have so many physical cards. You can only build so many decks. You can only break down one deck to build another deck. The entire concept of cards really highlight how much they are negative compared to just an RPG game, where in an RPG game you could theoretically have entire harems of characters that would be on your team. Like Pokemon, for instance, is a great example of that. You can just have an entire group of Pokemon and then easily swap it out, and there's just no real limitations there short of grinding and capturing one more Pokemon. I suppose the early generations of Pokemon had like a maximum number of Pokemon you could have in your Pokebox, but that's about it. Almost all the Pokemon, with the exception of a couple in the first generation, would have been recapturable, so if you had to release a Pidgey, you could go and capture another Pidgey later. I definitely don't feel like this live 2D feeling image of a character makes sense in Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh's just too old to have that anime color palette and that aesthetic. It's just not gonna work. We've just established too much, even though Yu-Gi-Oh! Is incredibly inconsistent in its visuals. Just look at the cards in my hands and the cards on the table. None of them scream that they should be matching this mate character. So, okay, for the catch-up section, yesterday I spent some extra time actually working on the entombing script program for Linux, KDE Linux, so that particularly on the Steam Deck, which is where my motivation is coming from, you would be able to uninstall programs while still leaving an icon that would then reinstall programs so that they would be, you could remember that they existed and suggest to people if you were going to make your own build of SteamOS some applications that won't actually take up space. So I spent a lot of time there, and I'm making decent progress. It still needs at least a day's worth of testing, and I need to write install scripts, and there is certainly some aspects that I'm just having to admit I don't know, and there's a level of compatibility there that I'm not even going to bother to try. I'm just trying to finish this project and get it out there so somebody else could look at it and hopefully just take it over. This was a project certainly that I just had hoped I could make a feature request and have somebody else be ambitious and build it, but no such luck. I did find that there's a GitHub page for SteamOS, and I feel like maybe feature requests being put there will get better reception than putting feature requests into the chat of Steam itself, which seems to be pretty much a dead zone, just full of other people requesting other things, and it doesn't seem like there's any actual employee at Valve potentially even reading the feature requests, at least not responding to it, which that's not helpful. And I don't know if I did much of anything else other than scheduled some videos and uploaded videos, and so I did a little bit of YouTube video scheduling. That's something I've been needing to do and something that will be helpful to do. But that's pretty much it. I'm still watching a lot of Cracking the Cryptic, and Sudoku Sleuth now is a new Sudoku channel that I've started watching, and YouTube even recommended a third channel, but in fairness to that, well, in criticism of that third channel, the Sudoku solver on that one spent a massive amount of time at the beginning promoting himself and just making a terrible experience right at the front of it before he even started to solve the Sudoku, and then definitely implied while he was struggling to solve the Sudoku that he wasn't always capable of solving the Sudokus. So really, in seeing that YouTuber and that one video from that YouTuber, I saw myself quite a bit in that if I was ever crazy enough to try to make a Sudoku YouTube channel or content consistently, I would be incredibly poor at it, and that incredible low quality video that would be made is not a direction I want to move into. This guy has got me. The best I can hope for would be to maybe get something that's going with this card. I don't even know if I can activate this ability a second time. Nope, I can't, so it would just come down to, can he win in this one turn, and almost certainly he will. So at a random level, I was reminded of the PlayStation accessibility controller, and before I get to that, I wanted to talk about the Microsoft adaptive controller. unlike Microsoft, I think PlayStation actually is manufacturing and directly selling and releasing uh, the theirs, whereas this is very much being made by a different company and sold really just through Microsoft, and it was definitely used by Microsoft as a way of getting good advertisements, and that's about it. I've never seen this quad stick for quadriplegics. Interesting. Here's a suck blow tube, but I'm not sure what these are. These look like they may be just suck blow tubes, or points where you're to attach a suck blow tube also. The stealth switch 30-foot pedal, so there's some other things. Inherently, what I wanted to point out here is that there's been no update on these announcements or stories. We've gotten, as far as I can tell, nobody has actually bit and used this equipment to enough that they could sing their praises. You would think that there would be a charity event every year, and in that charity event you would be giving away a lot of these to people who are disabled, and you would be getting a lot of feedback. Now, inherently, it is a case that every single person's disability is going to be extremely different, and Microsoft's concept on that was to basically sell you a $100 device that really wouldn't work on its own, which is way too expensive, and the price hasn't gone down. Because, yeah, unless you're emulating just NES games, one giant button and a D-pad is not going to be good enough. And so applying a USB joystick on either side, or just having a accessible extra button connected to something, for $100 you basically need $50 worth of credit to buy each of the accessories. And inherently, I think that most gamers, or most people trying to game, are going to end up just having custom built things like this, and all the Xbox interface for $100 is doing is acting as an interface that maybe you don't even really need. Maybe you could spend about $10 on an ESP232 chip that would read the inputs and outputs, and then be a USB hardware device. And honestly, it's probably the better way that they should do this is that they should come back with a slim version of this that just gets rid of the big buttons and makes it just a tiny little dock port like that. And for each of the connectors, perhaps you sell expansion boards that would connect to it to give you more inputs and outputs if you need it. But yeah, there's really been no story. And what's funny is you have this quad stick, which I want to learn more about. I've never even heard of this one. And so inherently, this is starting from $550. Look at the price, and it's obviously parts of this have been 3D printed. Yeah. Inherently, it really is just a case where companies are using these types of devices to get, yeah, it's not really saying too much here, that to get free press and to appear like they care about people. This is a completely different website than Microsoft. Also, this joystick is a Logitech joystick. A lot of these are Logitech things. This I don't think is from Microsoft either. Could look at all Xbox adaptive controller accessories. and see how long the list even is. 15 accessories, each one being overpriced by kind of a lot. $40 for a joystick isn't terrible, but $95 for a micro light switch, $75 for a single button. You are paying way more of a premium than most disability equipment goes. $310 for this joystick, $20 for this. Even that might be a little overpriced. Yeah. So it's no surprise nobody went with this or used this, and why we're not getting any positive feedback from it. Now, as the next thought, what I was thinking about was the PlayStation version, which it has come out, and surprisingly, I was kind of surprised that it has come out, because there was not even as much fanfare for the PlayStation version than there was for the Microsoft version. So much so that I honestly believed it was still just being advertised and in development. Now, overall, I don't know if there's any accessories that the PlayStation version has to sell. Theoretically, they would be the exact same accessories using the exact same mini stereo jack to connect to them, but you can see they are just blue silhouettes right now. Overall, I like the visual design of the PlayStation accessibility in the abstract, but without anybody being disabled actually reviewing it and playing it, it's uncertain how good of a design it really is. Now, I am seeing now on the page that they're showing off like packaging and how it would be received, whereas they were not really showing a lot of information when it first came out. And certainly at a certain level, I have to admit, yes, you can't make a lot of sales around selling accessibility devices, and it still has same old problems. This accomplishes a lot more, I think, though, by having like one big button in the middle and then a multitude of buttons around the edge and a joystick built in instead of just a D-pad. Let's see if this video looks interesting enough to actually watch. This is probably something we've already seen, but inherently, you know, it is just an also-ran product that was trying to copy Microsoft. And I think Sony probably did do it better, and I think it still didn't really matter. See, that's a really cool idea, that you can change the keycap on the analog stick to be an analog stick or a joystick, arcade joystick. You can remap all the buttons, but you have the buttons built in. You can label all of the buttons with one or two inputs. You can have multiple profiles. I mean, it's kind of a cool concept of a device, even without the accessibility. One thing I will say is also it is nice that it has multiple points which you can attach it, so you can actually attach it to a wheelchair instead of just having it on a table. And that's something I'd like to see in the Steam Deck too, is that there is a thought there, certainly, that you could attach a Steam Deck to a wheelchair, and maybe that would be a useful computer / gaming console for people with disabilities. The other thing to point out here is that the Access controller, which was released on December 6th, is only $90, which isn't that much for a controller. Now, I do think the extra 1, 2, 3, and 4 may be a little short on extra connections, so you might want to be a little cautious on that. But then also you could buy 2 of these, and then you'd have 8 extra connections. And I think that's probably a decent balance, because if you need to use extra 1, 2, and 3, and 4, you're probably also just admitting that you can't use any of the buttons around the edge or in the center or the analog stick here, which comes with 3 different ways in which you can move it. And so this just wouldn't be a device for you if you needed more than 3 in most cases, I would imagine. So just like a much better design, in my opinion. You have 1024 screw holes here and 1/4 or quarter 20 screw hole attachments there. But yeah, literally no advertisement. Perhaps the warranty is a problem, and apparently you can just buy now, pay later on Sony's website, which is weird, but whatever. But yeah, inherently there's been no talk about that, and amongst the past quarter, like January 1st through today, April 12th, at any point both Microsoft and Sony could have promoted those hardware devices more and not hurt themselves at all, other than they would be spending money to advertise things, because they've got very little else that they were releasing and that they were excited about. It's been, I think, at least over a year, if not 2, that the Microsoft Accessibility Controller has been out. I have never seen any of the games promote or advertise that they work with the controller or works great with the controller. And certainly Sony hasn't released any games and said it works great with the accessibility controller. You would think that it might just be in the background of announcements or commercials for games like Spider-Man and such, just to remind people it exists. But yeah, they have no interest in it. Now, Steam is in a weird position, because with the Steam Deck now, they are entering the console market to a certain level, so there is almost an argument around Steam thinking about making an accessibility controller, except for I imagine Steam will just say that with their touchpads, the Steam Deck is as accessible as they care to really be, and that it's good enough already, which, depending on each individual's disability, that might very well be true, that the touchpads help enough. And nothing really would stop you from using a Microsoft or a PlayStation accessibility controller on a Steam Deck. Nintendo, on the other hand, has no excuse. Like, obviously, particularly if you're targeting kids, which is what they like to advertise, take note that you never see commercials of a 50, 60-year-old dying of cancer who lost a hand, lost a limb. It's always children's hospitals, and usually it's the same children's hospitals that are advertising and showing disabled children, when in reality, if you ran the statistics, the vast majority of disabled people would be very old, not children. Although perhaps very old disabled people have no interest in playing video games, or but that would only be pretty much baseless speculation on my part. I imagine most disabled people would love to play video games because they are so limited in other entertainment activities and activities in general that they need to find things to keep their minds occupied and their time occupied. At the price of $90 for the PlayStation accessibility controller though, it's still not really cheap enough. Like, even controllers for PlayStation and Xbox are too expensive, but it's not really cheap enough for what would be the most common scenario, which is a kid falls down and breaks an arm, breaks a wrist, breaks a hand. It's not something that serious. They will recover in a few months, but they're in a cast right now and they would like to play video games. At that point, it almost feels like there needs to be a rental system that would exist for accessibility controllers, and some kind of health insurance scheme, which almost certainly, if it was a health insurance scheme, it would come out of the pockets of everybody else who's poor. But yeah, it's just not reasonable for a kid to break their arm or hand or limbs that they would use to play video games with temporarily, and then you will go out and buy a $90 controller to accommodate them to play video games for a couple of months. If anything, that's probably a decent business opportunity, that to just have some rental service that you could possibly advertise through hospitals and see if maybe insurance would pay for it. But even if you didn't go through any of that and you just directly rented accessibility controllers, that would be an interesting idea. Although it probably wouldn't work that well as a business opportunity, because if a kid did just break his wrist, his arm, his hand in some way that he can't play video games with a regular controller, you probably also just paid a expensive copay. Let's just assume at minimum $500 to get the kid in a cast, go to the hospital, get the bone set, things like that. At least, ideally, that would be the minimum of what you would do. So yeah, you do run into that weird situation, and that's about the only time where health insurance would make sense. And in contrast, my understanding of other kinds of assistive devices like wheelchairs and crutches, you can kind of get for free, because you can go down to a charity shop, junk shop, and find crutches. Maybe those aren't medically safe, but yeah, you can get them free. And even at that, crutches tend to be fairly cheap anyways. But when you start to talk about wheelchairs and walkers and other kinds of medical things, the paperwork and the red tape, to my understanding, usually takes so long that a kid in the cast probably wouldn't even get the controller before they were ready to be out of the cast again. It really would have to be a push by PlayStation and Microsoft. And the charity that makes game stations for hospitals, they are only doing so much, obviously. They certainly aren't targeting adults. It's not like every person goes into a hospital and then they say, hey, would you like a video game console in your room? They may be doing that for kids, but that'd be about it. Yeah, I don't know if I could have really won here on this one. So anyways, that's kind of what I've got to thinking about yesterday. As far as other video game news, Avalanche Studios developers have formed a bargaining agreement with Swedish unions. The Avalanche Studios CEO Stefana, I can't even pronounce that, said that bargaining agreements help the studio become one of the best workplaces in the game industry. Yeah, I am not informed at all as far as what the state of unions are in Sweden, whether they are fairly powerful or not. So I can't comment really any further than that. Formation of a bargaining agreement is always the first step to getting a proper contract with proper terms as far as pay and compensation and things like healthcare and retirements and pensions and things like that. All of that has to start with the first contract, and there definitely can be a lot more work that needs to be done between a bargaining agreement and that. A bargaining agreement is effectively just saying that the corporation is willing to stop fighting the concept of the union existing and will negotiate with the union on a contract. And negotiation on that first contract or on subsequent contracts are almost always where the conflicts and the strikes start to happen. Whether the union is demanding too much, which is what corporations often try to imply, or whether the corporations are just not even showing up and negotiating at all, which happens way more often than you would think. GameDeveloper.com also has this story after EA came back and denied it. There's a report that Dead Space has been shelved again as Motive prioritizes Iron Man and Battlefield. Let's see. Earlier this week, Jeff Grubb from Giant Bomb claimed plans for a remake of Dead Space 2 were scrapped so Motive could help with DICE's Battlefield series. eBay swiftly debunked those rumors, telling IGN the story had no validity to the story. So, yeah. After summer 2023, the Dead Space team moved on to new projects. Yeah, I don't know what effectively new information their GameDeveloper.com is leaning on here, other than there's a Bloomberg report now. Yeah. Seems like they're heavily bearing all their information on this link to a Bloomberg report, and perhaps there's just a shift here where the EA Motive is just not the company that's not the division that's actually working on a Dead Space 2 remake, and so maybe it actually hasn't been shelved, or maybe this is just EA lying. That's pretty much what I said the first time this got reported is that EA, I wouldn't put it past EA to just straight up lie and say the story is wrong, even when there's evidence or things. This is a great example, though, of GameDeveloper.com not putting enough information in an article to make it actually worth reading. Here we have a Bloomberg article from Jason Schreier, who also is, I think, pretty much a great friend of Jeff Grubb, although Jason Schreier is also the one person that breaks rumors in the video game industry that has a level of credibility in my book, and that barely, I would say, even at that. Yeah. Bloomberg is about the only real news site that can afford to pay somebody to actually do the actual real news work that Jason Schreier often does. So I'm trying to scroll down this article here, and clearly if I'm ever going to read a Bloomberg article, I need to block a lot of content here so it's a better read. I have to admit, though, it's a little unfair to have people just come back and ignore EA's own comments just to double down on speculation and rumors. Where mainstream video game journalism is effectively becoming almost like a mob, where it's like, no, the reality is what we say, regardless of what you say. Yeah, there's kind of nothing in this article that actually implies that it actually is that any new information here is. If anything, it feels like this article is reporting on what Jeff Grubb said. Because the real comment here is from EA. We don't normally comment on rumors, but there's no validity to the story. And then there's just nothing else here. Other than maybe Motive has said that it's working on 2 other games, which maybe means they are not working on Dead Space 2, but somebody else is. So, yeah. Inherently, this is a problem with mainstream video game journalism and turns me off from following them anymore. It's just that it has become such a hyper-reactionary, we're right always, we'll double down on reporting the same things even if we're proven wrong over and over again, that they just can't really be called journalists at this point. They have no journalistic integrity, and I feel like this is exactly an example of this, and Schreier is just reporting on somebody else whose reports, which is standard for mainstream video game journalists, even though it's still not very integral, because, or whatever, how you'd say that, it's not very good journalism because they never actually fact check anybody else who is reporting anything. So if Jeff Grubb makes up a rumor, which I'm pretty sure he's made up at least one rumor in his career, other people just report on it without getting it independently confirmed, or they're getting it confirmed by people who they should know better as far as them being liars or untrustworthy sources. But yeah, once you have EA come out and say this is wrong, you lose any protection there to just report on what somebody else is reporting when you have conflicting sources telling you conflicting things. And you need to quote your sources at some point, even if you quote them as anonymous sources, if you're going to counteract EA's denial. Again, I think we're moving into a new meta on Yu-Gi-Oh! Where I'm not sure that my deck is going to be able to survive. It did. It did survive at one. Yeah, unless I'm just misreading this article completely, this seems like Jason Schreier is just reporting what Jeff Grubb said without having any sources of his own. And unless this first part here is to say EA put the Dead series on ice for a second time despite receiving a critically acclaimed remake last year that appeared. Which, if this paragraph is supposed to say EA today has announced that they put the series on ice, it's written so poorly because I feel like this is just a baseless speculation paragraph. Really would like them to like include the press releases on some of this. Yeah. Because I really just don't believe that this is accurate reporting. At the very least, I can say Jason Schreier's and Bloomberg's article is saying something different, whereas GameDeveloper.com is doing really a game of telephone by reporting on what Jeff Grubb said and now reporting on what Bloomberg said. And inherently, that is the problem with video game journalism overall. For other GameDeveloper.com articles, which are mostly just going through all of them now at the beginning of the stream, I probably was always going through most of them anyways. Epic execs say that IP holders don't really care about Fortnite, but they want the ecosystem. Effectively talking to start off with here with Lego and Disney, Marvel, and everything Disney owns, wanting to be in the Fortnite ecosystem of perhaps getting more money back from V-Bucks sales and having a somewhat large locked-in audience of kids, Fortnite players. Don't think there's anything more to this article I care to really mention, though. I'm not really pressed for time today, but also just inherently I don't want to go into a 4-hour stream for no reason. I did go back to Twitch and listen to the video and check that audio actually was playing on the last stream, which inherently I went back and deleted all previous streams that did not have audio on Twitch. So I am starting over from scratch, but at the very least I am starting over at a better point. I am consistently, it seems, at 800 subscribers on YouTube, which is nice. Still 200 short of even beginning to think about being monetized. I would love to see it all snowball as an experience, but I don't think that really is going to happen. YouTube Creators was doing this bracket, and Let's Plays won. Of course, the bracket was based on people on Twitter voting on the polls, so inherently it's just showing you that of the people who follow YouTube Creators, which is almost all exclusively YouTube Creators, Let's Plays are very popular, because obviously I think it's pretty easy to guess that the vast majority of people who are YouTube content creators are Let's Players. In fairness, Let's Playing gives you an easy framework and a lot of content to easily understand and know how you're going to create it, whereas being a vlogger requires you to have something to say, and unboxing requires you to have a bunch of sponsors or money to buy things. So yeah, Let's Plays won. And the only thing I could really hope from this bracket, which it probably won't happen, is that YouTube creators and YouTube themselves would see the outcome of that and see if they could tweak the algorithm a little bit more to recommend Let's Players or help Let's Players make better content and get more viewers, get to the right viewers who really want to sit and watch all of the gameplay. Which I suspect none of that really is going to happen, and that this was a pointless exercise on YouTube creators' behalf to just get more views for themselves on Twitter. GameDeveloper.com says Crash 4, It's About Time, has sold over 5 million copies. That would be in 4 years if this came out in 2020. So I don't know if that number is particularly great. I think Crash 4 is actually on PC, but I don't think it's on Nintendo Switch or Xbox, so it may have been fairly limited because of those reasons. Yeah, it is a nice big round number, but in the amount of time it took, it to me feels like it's too low of a number for that amount of time to celebrate and mention. And inherently it may have just been mentioned in some shareholders meeting, and it may just be GameDeveloper.com making a bigger deal about it compared to, say, just having a press release announcement. I'm always in this weird position where I've never played any of the Crash Bandicoot games, and except for maybe for 10 or 20 minutes once or twice. I've just never really found a game there that I could really want to play. It does just feel like it is the wrong camera angle for most Crash Bandicoot games, and it's more of a Sonic clone at the wrong camera angle. Although, in fairness, Crash 4 may really not have anything that is close to gameplay like Crash 1 did. Maybe a completely different game. I don't know how big of a deal this really is, but Baldur's Gate 3 has been given Game of the Year at the 2024 BAFTA Awards, which means that they've gotten Game of the Year at what is almost certainly the top 5 video game award events, or they've gotten major awards for each of those events. Maybe not Game of the Year. There really, I don't think, is that much competition otherwise as far as the Baldur's series. So yeah, I don't think there was a lot of other competition that year anyways, so it'd be hard to think they could have given these awards to anybody else. Baldur's Gate 3 is an example, I guess, of a game that did get a decent amount of its due. People sung its praises. People, I think, probably even today are still playing it and enjoying it at their own paces. It was talked about for many weeks as a big hyped up game. The experience around Baldur's Gate and the reception of Baldur's Gate is kind of the reception I would expect to see a lot more AAA games get, and they often just don't seem like they really do get any reception. The distributed studio, maybe distributed is the name of a game, Possibility Space, has abruptly been shut down by Prytania Media. I don't recognize any of these words at all. Let's see. There's an update here. In an email obtained by Polygon's Nicole Carpenter, Prytania co-founder Jeff Strain attributed the closure of Possibility Space to an incoming report from Kotaku's Ethan Gash. In his statement, Strain claimed he was asked non-public information about a game named Project Vonyet following a meeting with an unnamed publishing partner. He canceled the project and ended the studio. The quote here is, "To see internal team members under a confidentiality agreement engage in these leaks was sickening," wrote Strain. So interesting. So the claim here is an employee was asked to leak stuff, which is not, to my understanding, ethically allowed for journalists. Is that you can't ask for stuff and induce the commission of a civil crime, I guess is what you might call it, although civil crime might be wrong word. It might be a civil tort is, I think, the legal term to go with there. But yeah, suffice it to say, journalists are not supposed to induce people to break their confidentiality agreements. And apparently that information has allegedly come out, and they have shut down the entire company because of that. Which I feel like that's probably some great ABS, if I was to guess. I would think almost certainly the truth is something else, and this is at best just an excuse for a shutdown that was coming either way. Okay. It's a question of just what is the value of doing all of this, but you want to get those lifetime events happening, you want to get the daily quests done. This should be the last game we play for today anyways. End on a big win. rank up to gold tier 1. That's a good level of success. Getting 8 gems, getting 1 legacy pack, getting 1 normal card, all insignificant amounts of rewards for the amount of time one duel takes. Let's see. As far as daily quest goes, I need to duel in solo mode if I'm going to get around to doing that, and that's about it. I could go over here, just see how many crafting points we can get for dismantling all extra cards. Kind of a significant amount of normal crafting points and rare crafting points. Only 30 super rare crafting points and no ultra rare crafting points. Inherently, I still would only be enthusiastic of if they introduced a system where I could convert, say, 10 normal crafting points into 1 rare crafting point, and then 10 rares into 1 super rare, and then 10 super rares into 1 ultra rare. Which that would be terrible conversion, certainly, but it's really what you need. I am probably at a point where I could craft 3 copies of every normal card in the game and just have a complete collection of all the normal cards. It would just take too much time and not be that rewarding to do it. So the points just don't matter on normal. Rares, probably can't craft every rare, certainly can't craft every super rare, certainly can't craft more than even a couple ultra rares, which, yeah, they're with the super rares and ultra rare currencies there really isn't enough there to even build a single deck from scratch if you wanted to. The story continues. It says the report, it should be noted, is not published at the time of writing. Further, Strain's behavior is similar to that of his wife Annie, who made a preemptive statement on Gash's report last week. Let's see. Strain ended his statement by revealing he was stepping away from games to focus on his family and care for Annie. So, like, I just don't know any of these companies, but apparently the studio was formed mid-2021 with several prominent names behind it, including Waypoint Media's Austin Walker. He was at Giant Bomb for a brief time, and Ubisoft alum Liz England. So it seems like not all was perfect in paradise there. What I'd like to know more about it was this game distributed. I've never heard of it. Yeah, this is a story that's effectively just more of a mystery than anything else. And this is where more information is definitely needed. The story that was going to be published needs to be published in retrospect, and it needs to just be a better foundation of understanding what this is all about. Possibility Space was a subsidiary of Prytania Media, which itself was headed up by Jeff and Ann Strain. In March, the pair fully closed down Crop Circle Games, which was furloughed before its closure. So it seems like they were struggling anyways. Moving on, GameDeveloper.com has an article, How to Build Branching Narrative Without Breaking the Bank. If you're into game development, this might be an interesting read, so I'm just going to point it out and then quickly move forward. I'm not going to inherently endorse anything they say that was accurate. YouTube Gaming is pathetically trying to get people to comment about Rock Band for really no reason. And then they're promoting another YouTuber I have no idea about, who's apparently been on YouTube for 14 years, which honestly means about nothing. Let's see. It is somewhat questionable whether YouTube Gaming has ever posted anything of helpfulness or of usefulness or of any value really at all, or if it isn't just a pointless Twitter page that very possibly should be reorganized. You can see just like how YouTube creators, YouTube Gaming, YouTube, all of those Twitter accounts could be very silent and never post any original content themselves and just be there so people could comment to them or direct message them. And then every time there would be a YouTube in general announcement, you could see all of those accounts posting the exact same thing. But I can't help but suspect that there's 3 different people running at least 3 different YouTube Twitter feeds, and that is their one job, and the only thing that keeps them from getting fired is because they're running Twitter accounts and desperately trying to make content and doing, in the case of YouTube Gaming in particular, a terrible job. Let's see, GameDeveloper.com says the CD Projekt boss says studios need to change how it makes games. He explains how the Cyberpunk developer is learning from the past while looking to the future. I definitely agree with that video game developers need to take a step back and be less profit driven, take a little bit longer time to make games to make sure the games are polished. They need to diversify the gameplay mechanics and styles and visuals and approaches so every game doesn't just feel the same or look the same. They need to quit following the leader and copying each other. And yeah, they need more creatives in charge, I think, and less just money managers in charge. Inherently, though, I also think it's easy for CD Projekt Red to throw out those statements without really admitting that they themselves have done a kind of poor job. Witcher as a series, Witcher 1 and 2 are not really spoken of. Witcher 3 is very well appreciated. Cyberpunk 2077 had all the problems that a AAA game development tends to have, being over budget and launching very buggy, and only at the very end of its lifestyle of its life cycle was Cyberpunk 2077 at a point where I might recommend it. Meanwhile, both of those games are huge AAA budget games. Both of those games are copying a lot of other gameplay mechanics. They aren't quite really doing anything new or unique or different. So if the lessons and the change that I think should be made actually was made by CD Projekt Red, I would expect them to come out with something closer to Minecraft than Witcher 3 or Cyberpunk 2077. And that's not really what they're going to do. They're going to make Witcher 4, which is going to feel very similar to Witcher 3, I'm sure. And then they may try to make another Cyberpunk, which will be very similar to Cyberpunk 2077. So they can talk the talk, I just don't believe that they really can walk the walk there. GameDeveloper.com says Square Enix hopes to develop Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 in about 3 years. The main story has been completed and the voice recording could start soon. It's believable that that would be doable, considering that there's unlikely a lot of new programming that has to happen in Part 3. The gameplay mechanics and a lot of the models and a lot of the enemies you're going to fight are already set in stone from part 1 and part 2. So, yeah, 3 is not that crazy. But in reality, they probably shouldn't be saying 3 as they should be saying 5 years, and then buying themselves some time when they release it 2 years early. Although inherently, the best way they could have made a Square Enix Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy would have been to secretly make the game for over the course of 10 to 15 years, and then surprise release the game, part 1, and then announce part 2 and part 3 on that surprise release of part 1, and have them staggered by maybe a year at most in the release time. Inherently, the way they're doing this is cannibalizing, I think, the attention from future Final Fantasy games. People are less likely to play Final Fantasy 17 or 18 or 16 now because they're focused on waiting for Final Fantasy 7 remakes. Let's see. EA also reportedly has cut the Apex Legends UK-based Q&A team. 50 contract workers have allegedly been let go. This is from GameDeveloper.com. Very believable. Although it's just a QA team, so you really can't take too much from that. Let's see. Komatsu has Stellar Blade Developer Diary Episode 1 The Journey. Stellar Blade hype feels like it might be dying down a little bit, but I don't feel like we are at a point yet where the game is actually out and being played. So I think the reviews, we are very much in just a holding position until we start to get actual reviews. Apparently Gio Corsi, someone I don't recognize, has joined Nintendo of America's AAA third-party games portfolio management team. You have two old people in Mario and Luigi hats. He is the former head of commercial at Iron Galaxy Studios, chief product officer at IllFonic, and head of global second-party games at Sony Interactive Entertainment. So effectively, he is a Sony employee, is about the best way to describe him. Which, yeah, we'll see how that is. Now they say Nintendo's AAA third-party portfolio management crew, without naming whether that is Disney Treehouse or if there's a different name for that management team. Maybe it doesn't have it. In this case in particular, I think this is a fairly poor picture. Like, you got a pretty old guy in the foreground here that really should probably just be in a suit and tie with the cameras zoomed several feet further back so you can hide wrinkles and things like that. And this is a younger looking guy, but definitely not young enough to be wearing a Luigi hat. I don't think this is like Doug Bowser or anything either. I have no idea who this is. Honestly, I don't even know which one of these is Gio Corsi. Yeah. So, of course in a lot of ways, this is just unactionable information. Anyways, taking this information, you can't really take it to mean much at all. It seems like a middle manager in a lot of other companies now works for Nintendo and is a middle manager. Maybe their actions will, or their presence will lead to actions later on, but pretty much impossible to forecast what will happen. GameDeveloper.com has this headline: Stellar Blade fans have been asked to go easy on its demo, which is almost twice as popular as Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. I wonder if this was a joking statement that is being taken perhaps too literal by GameDeveloper.com, or possibly a completely fake statement that was never actually said by anybody at Shift Up. Maybe Final Fantasy VII Square Enix people are asking them to go easy on the demo. I would generally agree with the sentiment that you shouldn't go too hard on a demo to burn yourself out potentially on the main game. I doubt Stellar Blade is going to be that long of a game anyway, so if you are just perfect at playing it from the beginning, you may just finish a game in 4 hours, but you probably won't want to do that. Although, it definitely feels like Stellar Blade is one of those games that's being designed so you can play it multiple times. The skin suit reducing your defense obviously screams that for a lot of players, if they're going to play the game a second time, they're going to wear the skin suit and become really perfect at it. Weirdly, that's something that Nier Automata, being a longer game, never really got to enjoy. That there really isn't a lot of argument, or I never saw anybody trying to play Nier Automata perfectly with like no hit clears or anything like that. But Nier Automata's replay value came from its different endings. According to GameDeveloper.com, it was shift up. This may be a case where maybe Shift Up doesn't want to anger Square Enix, which has obviously a decent amount of influence on Sony, since Sony is the platform that Stellar Blade is being released on. I got recommended a YouTube video where there was a person talking about Sony moving from OLED technology to LCD technology for its next line of TVs, and weirdly they said that Sony was a Chinese company, and I really had to take a pause there and wonder if that was just a misspeak, because Sony is obviously a Japanese company. There's no real debate there at all. Or if it wasn't literally just yellow journalism that was being said there. Because in China, I wouldn't put it past Chinese people in China to say anything in Japan is actually just Chinese. In the same way that China calls Taiwan China Taipei. China is effectively trying to promote the idea that everything around them is and has always been part of China, and eventually they'll just try to push their border to the point where they're going to claim every part of the planet is China. So yeah, I definitely took some pause there. Speaking of China and pause, American McGee, after being fairly silent, or completely silent for months on YouTube, has come back to advertise his wife's Plushie Dreadful line, and so I'm seeing advertisements on his channel once again. Every now and then he would post something about his family, but yeah, it is certainly weird that he hasn't just locked down and privated his YouTube channel after the failure of an American McGee's Alice Madness Returns sequel. But yeah, my concern certainly there is the Plushie Dreadfuls in a major part, or would be that he is eventually just going to hope that people forget about the failure of trying to get funded to make a new American McGee's Alice game, and then he'll just start the whole process all over again and make a pitch for a new game which will never get funded, just in the long run to continue getting people's interest to sell his Plushie Dreadfuls, which is about the only thing that his wife's company and him seem to be able to actually manufacture and sell. But yeah, he really should have just gone private on his channel and just entered the private live. Although to take a step back, what he really should have done is never publicly discussed the development and negotiations of a new video game. Made the video game in secret like everybody else does because publishers want it that way, and then see if he could actually get funding that way. He put all his hopes and dreams out for everybody else to see, and once they got smashed, that just became a worse situation as for American McGee, because now he's forever needs to be known as a failure as far as making games in the modern times. The quote here is, "We're so grateful that you love our game. To enjoy our main game properly, though, please go easy on the demo." Stellar Blade said 50 plus hours of demo play, ... we're scared. So they probably are being a little bit serious here, but obviously they are also just joking around, and I do feel like GameDeveloper.com is losing some of that in translation. I do feel like 50 plus hours in any demo is almost certainly too much, so I do agree with the sentiment. But you know, also inherently 50 plus hours in any demo may just mean somebody fell asleep on the pause menu in a demo. Like, I have plenty of games on Steam that have hundreds of hours where I really wasn't playing them. I just fell asleep with the game paused. And once again, this is kind of a story that is maybe a hype story at best. I don't know if it's really news though. And it does feel like this might be the kind of story that is specifically getting pressed, whereas if say it was the exact opposite situation and a more mainstream game like Final Fantasy VII, which doesn't have as lewd of imagery, said we were asking players to go easy on the demo, I'm not sure if that story would have gotten published by Video Games Chronicle. So yeah, by all means, if you want to play the demo, do whatever you want, but my personal suggestion is, yeah, don't play it too much. Don't become an expert at the game before it even comes out. And generally my personal recommendation is to never play demos. Even if the demo has like unique content you won't see in the main game, play the main game first, then go back and play the demo if you want more content at that point, and then maybe play the main game a second time. But usually, even if there is unique content in a prologue or a demo, which they tend to call them prologues when it has different information or different gameplay content, usually that stuff is not really quality enough that you need to play it. Magnum raids are coming to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet this weekend, according to Video Games Chronicle, which is probably not as big of news as they'd like it to be, but I figured I'd make that consider it big news. The release candidates for the Godot engine 4.1.4 and 4.2.2 release candidate 3 have come out or are coming out. So the Godot engine is trying to add some features, add some fixes. List here, perhaps not super long. The Arduino Studio has a release candidate for version 3, which would bump up support for a lot of libraries and things, I think, fairly significantly. So if version 3.0 comes out, that might be a good time to start new projects in Arduino, although might never be really a great time to make any kind of big projects in Arduino Studio, versus just using the ESP IDF if you're programming an ESP or some other IDF that would be more helpful. Although I guess if you're using an Arduino chip, using Arduino, it makes the most sense that in that case if it is a proper Arduino chip from Arduino themselves. The Fallout TV series is out now, at least a few episodes are. I haven't gotten around to watching it, but I will say I have seen a significant increase of cosplayers in the past couple days, mostly female, in the jumpsuits doing Fallout, which maybe a lot of that is being suggested or paid for by Amazon Prime. There is a Reddit subreddit called Gaming Circle Jerk where I think the general idea is that most of the people on that and everybody is supposed to be sarcastic, I think, and just circle jerk themselves around. But it gets to the front page, and any subject that is a circle jerk subreddit probably shouldn't be on the front page, because it gets harder for regular people to realize, oh, every single comment here is a troll comment, and they are just being sarcastic in their comments. At least that's my understanding of it. I might be wrong. And so there was a post that somebody made somewhere, probably sarcastically, where they showed the actress from the Fallout TV series in baggy, dirty, jumpsuits, pants, and so she kind of just has a flat butt, and it's showing, the camera's looking at it from behind, and then somebody in this picture has added CGI tight latex form-fitting buttocks imagery, and then the Gaming Circle Jerk group is making fun of the person for doing that CGI, which, yeah, the whole thing is stupid. In the case of an actual actress and an actual human being, the idea of here I fixed it with CGI is a little bit more obnoxious than potentially making a mod for a video game and a video game character who is not a real person and not inherently really supposed to represent the body shape or form of a real person. In my mind, at least, that's how I would take that. But also, I would say there's probably a slight difference between completely baggy and form-fitting when you have a camera making a photo shot that is showing the backside of a lady, almost certainly intentionally to show off her buttocks, that most women that I have heard talk about it do want their clothes to flatter their form as much as possible. And yeah, in most women that I've seen that dress tend not to dress baggy in the West, that they are wearing sweatpants and Lululemon things and showing off their curves. So yeah, the image, in my opinion, is not great. Now, I did want to complain specifically about this cosplay. Now, I feel like this is kind of a problem specifically for Fallout. Fallout has a unique time setting and in which society ended when the nukes fell, and it's been stuck in that time frame since then. So should have that 1940s feel and look. And while this cosplayer is obviously very attractive, her look with the hair and the makeup and the face is not accurate and for what it should be in Fallout. This is a cosplayer in a Fallout jumpsuit, whereas this is much closer to what the Fallout pinup girl style should be if you were going to cosplay. It is going to be very much that 1940s white, blonde haired, blue eyes, Aryan, big red lipstick aesthetic. The makeup here is subtle and paler. That would be the aesthetic for pinup images in the Fallout universe in my mind. And take note that you have dirty boots and dirty clothes here, which make this cosplay look much more accurate in the long run. To the point where this almost looks like it's CG and animated, which is probably a great outcome for what they're doing here. Like, literally, this hand looks real. These legs look real. But once you get to this line, the colored background feels like it's could be fake. Maybe there's just a lot of photoshopping going on there. But yeah, kind of just rambling there. Inherently, the Fallout series is expected to have dirty and ugly people in it, in a post-apocalypse world. And I think the bigger criticism will probably be that the actors and actresses are still going to be too beautiful looking for this situation in the environment. Refused Classification is a Twitter feed that covers mostly Australian, I think almost exclusively Australian censorship that is legally being done by Australia. And apparently Australia is trying to modernize their national classification scheme, their censorship group, with public submissions closing on the 16th of May. 3 key issues are identified for consideration as part of a second stage of classification reforms. Let's see. They want to clarify the scope and purpose of the scheme, including the types of content that should be classified, ensure that classification guidelines continue to be aligned with and responsive to the evolving community standards and expectations, and establishing fit-for-purpose governance and regulatory agreements for the scheme under a single national regulatory responsible for media classification. Now, obviously, this is a government censorship board, which they're never going to vote to shut themselves down, so each of these issues will almost certainly be addressed in a way to expand their control and their power, even if they choose not to actually use their power. And certainly you can comment all you want, and that might be slightly helpful, but truly the Australian people would have to demand the shutdown of the classification scheme in total, which is really what should happen there. Or at the very least, they need to remove the authority of the classification to refuse classification and effectively make things illegal in the country. Like, NC-17 movies in the United States do not mean that you can't watch a NC-17 movie anywhere in the United States, although, you know, things are changing in the United States too as far as that goes. I've seen several porn sites blocking Texas because of a law Texas put into place requiring that the porn sites collect people's identification, and the porn sites don't want to do that and then get hacked and leak all that ID info. But yeah, in Australia, refusing classification literally is that it has been censored. And effectively in the United States, an NC-17 film is going to be a failure. It's not going to air in any mainstream movie theaters ever, but you certainly could still go to an adult store in the United States and buy an NC-17 movie, where you can't do that in Australia. Right now it's films, books, games, and magazines, and TV. They don't have TV here for some reason. And then Fallout 4's delayed current gen upgrade is coming this month, so they seem to be a little late if they were trying to line that up with the TV series. And yeah, it's also coming to the Epic Game Store. Okay. Feel like I'm losing a little bit of steam here. Let's now go through all the games that came out and that we might want to make YouTube shorts on. It's not really a problem, but the situation is that I have made enough macros now that... Do I want to give this a chance? I guess I will. That I can get most things done and have extra time. The one thing that I'm still fairly limited on would be the fact that YouTube only allows me to upload 100 items a day, which doesn't make any sense because 100 YouTube shorts is not that many. Particularly since that's only 100 minutes of content. I would much prefer if they had a better system where it gave you back some uploads. Of course, that would take more calculations, and they are obviously just doing very basic calculations here. Has this person uploaded 100 things? Yes, no. YouTube Shorts seems to have mostly settled down into being what it is and what it is going to be. I don't think there's any real room to believe that they're going to embrace it more, or they're going to reduce the requirements for monetization, or they're going to pay people more. Texas border guard shooting aliens. That seems like that's intentionally trying to be somewhat controversial. At least in the title. Do I want to give this a chance? I think not. I did find that the application I would want to use to make a Sudoku puzzle of my own and potentially submit it to like Cracking the Cryptic is probably called Spin Sudoku Pad, which is like $3 on Steam. If I bought that though, I would definitely spend a lot of time on it and waste, I think, a lot of time on it. This Gigantic Rampage Edition is, I'm pretty sure, just an MMO. It says single player, or it's a MOBA. Yeah, everything here says 5 versus 5. So it is a MOBA, so I can take it off my follow list. Because I'm not going to play a MOBA, particularly a second release of a failed game. Botany Manor is doing very positively, so I think I'll go ahead and put that on the wish list. That doesn't look interesting enough. Children of the Sun, I'm gonna leave on the follow list. Still not certain about that game. And don't want to spend the time right now trying to figure out if I would be certain about that game. Bound might be something. Political Punch Arena. Yeah, another political game. Of course, the problem with any of these political meme games is that you really are just going to have the two major candidates in the United States and then a bunch of old people who aren't really that relevant anymore. Like Hillary Clinton. I really couldn't even tell you who that's supposed to be. Yeah, this is more controversy than it would be worth to own or play. Yeah. Definitely would waste a lot of time though if I was trying to make a Sudoku puzzle, and it would literally be for very little reward. Like, increasingly, I'm in this weird situation where I'm effectively forced into a vacation from making YouTube content, which is not going to really help my YouTube channel any, although maybe it will, frankly. Making less content might stop people from being overwhelmed by my content. But inherently, me making less content is not me making better content. And I am certainly at a loss as far as just how I personally can make better content. Unless I just end up doing a lot of stuff that I don't want to do, which is, yeah, not going to keep me making content if I'm just miserably spending hours and hours editing videos and struggling over making thumbnails, which I would never really be good at making thumbnails. So that would drive me crazy. Piloting a hot air balloon. That's an interesting thought for a game. And as I'm looking at all these games, Turbo Kid might be one of interest. It's just not a lot of amazingly interesting games. Perhaps my standards are too high, but it does just seem like there's a lot of dullness, even in the games that I would make a YouTube short on. And there's just a lot of room for disappointment even on the games that I think do potentially deserve something. Anomaly Loop is just Exit 8, but it has a different twist on it, so I'm gonna give it a chance. Whereas we saw a lot of other clones of Exit 8, or Station 8 I think was actually the name of it, that took the exact same concept and were really just trying to confuse people into purchasing the wrong game. Steal a little but stand out is a good concept if you are gonna make a clone of a game. Have different visuals, have different locations, storyline, narrative, things like that. There is inherently a problem with any project I engage with is that I'm spending a lot of time and energy often on things that will never in any form reward. A lot of times those rewards are when you spend time and energy is the hope to be paid, and certainly that would be nice, but also a lot of times we just want to be appreciated or have some reaction of some sort by other people. And certainly one part of starting my YouTube channel that was the admins, that a lot of this is potentially going to be shouting into the void, or that there will be just one person that maybe hears a video maybe years later. It's not inherently a thing where I wanted to ever become super popular, but I would like my YouTube channel to make enough income that it would be helpful in my old age to have some consistent income, or it would be helpful to have comments and feedback every now and then. And that's not just me, that's most people are seeking some form of validation to their activities and somebody to appreciate it. And certainly it's always been my experience in life, on almost anything I've done, it's felt like it's gone over the heads of a lot of people. A lot of times when I'm doing like programming things in particular, it's just like I cannot possibly explain a computer program to people who don't know or care anything about programming. As an example. So I'm fairly used to being underappreciated or unappreciated in that way. So YouTube was kind of an ideal choice for that reason. Anyways, let's check the charts here from SteamDB. I do feel like following SteamDB makes a lot of sense. Unfortunately, my chart doesn't represent the information as far as the 24-hour peak as well as SteamDB does. We have Helldivers 2 in the 6th position, and the Rocket Blade Point in the 5th, and Apex Legends in the 4th, which makes me feel like something has fallen down. Maybe Wallpaper Engine, which has an unfair advantage, I think, as an application. Baldur's Gate 3 is in 16. Let's see how far we have to scroll down until we see something that seems even slightly new, though. Maybe this T-mod loader, which again may not actually be a game. We've got some really low numbers for like Lethal Company and Sims 4 and Battlefield 5. Yeah, it definitely just doesn't feel like there's anything new right now. And the numbers feel fairly high. It may very well be a case where the numbers go higher in the top 10 position, the fewer the new games come out, because people return to the staples that they know and love instead of trying something new. It'll be interesting to see when Dueled Blade comes out, if it can break the top 100 even, and if it does skyrocket and stay high, or if all of a sudden it is just gonna skyrocket like Palworld did and then fall low, which Palworld specifically is, I think, really low down here. Is it below Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel, which kind of consistently is in the top 50? Yeah, I'm not seeing Palworld at all in the top 100. I probably missed it. I guess if I was going to be cynical, you can see Yu-Gi-Oh! Master Duel here, and I could just go up this list and say what games are more popular than Yu-Gi-Oh! And what games should I play before covering livestream news in that case. A lot of people would are still playing Team Fortress 2 as background footage. Baldur's Gate 3 actually is probably a slow enough game that if I played it, I could potentially replace Yu-Gi-Oh! With it, although it's too cinematic a game and too mature of a game, so it doesn't really work. Palworld is in the 15th spot. I missed it. I overlooked it. Stardew Valley is not something I can bear to play. Yeah, Counter-Strike 2 would obviously be your default thought. None of these games, almost none of these games are slow enough, though, to make sense to play it over a card game. And the fact that Yu-Gi-Oh's in the top 50, but we don't see, say, Shadowverse. Well, it's not surprising Shadowverse isn't anywhere in the top 100, but we're not seeing Magic the Gathering Arena either, or Hearthstone. Hearthstone's not on Steam. Magic the Gathering Arena I think is on Steam, but maybe not. It does at least tell me that Yu-Gi-Oh! Is the card game to play, and so it would be very hard for me to justify playing something different from that. As far as my chart goes, I'm not really fixing any of this. It does seem like we're seeing a little bit of a bump up on this Friday. Imagine people are getting off of work or school, so the numbers are going to go up. We still have yet to see the data being inputted getting squished off the scale. 9/16 was the first day I started collecting data, and it is just squishing that information more and more and more. And as far as the dots go, that's still really working fairly well. Clearly the rest of the chart needs tweaking and improvement, but yeah, the long-term trends are fairly helpful here, but with the exception of Palworld here, where it started high, went really high, and then fell back downward, and is still pretty much just falling downward. The trends don't really tell me much as far as video games. And they go up, they go down, and they trend downward in most cases. Let's see, as far as Steam goes, Digimon Masters. Let's see what that is all about. These look like very old versions of the Digidestined characters compared to the way they looked in the original Season 1. And Hogwarts Legacy being promoted, content warning being promoted, nothing particularly new. The Steam YouTube page has announced an RPG event as their next event, which, yeah, that tells me that the Steam summer sale is going to be really, really late, I think. And otherwise, this is mostly positive. Is this on my wish list? Just opening tabs that I really don't need to check. It's not like I could really budget for buying any video games after buying the Steam Deck. I really need to play an entire game on the Steam Deck just to wear in the buttons at the very least. I almost wonder if it would be worth it to buy refurbished Steam Decks as gifts. It probably would be. What I would say on that is, if you are planning on buying a So this one is rated very positively. I'll go ahead and put this on the wish list. If you're planning on buying the next Nintendo console, sorry, I keep losing my train of thought, then buying a refurbished Steam Deck in the same year, if you have to buy both, kind of makes some sense. It probably makes a lot of sense. This is mixed reviews. Nobody's enjoying it, which is a shame. I really wish there was a great Digimon game on Steam. Although I'm not even sure how much nostalgia really still exists around Digimon, particularly in the West. But you see how successful Palworld has been. I think Digimon done right could be as successful as Palworld has been so far. But yeah. Yeah, in the one scenario where you know you're going to buy the next Nintendo console day one, and you need a Steam Deck that can do a computer, buying a refurbed unit for $300 or less makes sense at that point. It's giving them like a really cheap version of it, which won't give them the better battery life, which won't give them the OLED screen, and will give them the very slow internal hard drive things, which that's the one thing I think it would be fairly safe to upgrade. I wouldn't be surprised if most refurb units of the LCD version, though, have them just taking out the EMC hard drives that are too slow, and then just by default upgrading them to a 64 gigabyte or 128 or 256 gigabyte space. I'm not sure what the real space requirement there. 64 gigabytes is probably too small. You probably want 128 at minimum, because the operating system itself is probably going to take about 22 gigabytes, I think is what I saw. So you really would only have about 40 gigs then. And it's very believable that there could be exactly one game that is over 40 gigs that you want to play, or you just wouldn't have a lot of room to install a bunch of games anyways. And that'd be fairly annoying if your slowest hard drive is also the one that you're constantly having to install different games on. Anyways, let's do the headlines. Today's felt a little slower than I would have liked. From video game news, let's read the headlines. Square Enix hopes to develop Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3 in about 3 years. Rockstar's raised GTA Plus prices up by 40%. That is way too much. The Sea of Thieves beta has launched for PS5. Stellar Blade fans asked to go easy on its demo, which is almost twice as popular as Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. It does certainly indicate that Stellar Blade has a chance to be super popular. You never really believe or expect that something that has long been established like Final Fantasy could be unset by a new game, which is a shame, particularly for the gaming industry, because it would certainly be nice if there were some revolutionary games out there that were way better than what has already been made. If there was a Mario game that was way better than Mario games and led to a series of new games from a new series from new creators and made Nintendo have to actually compete and try to do better. But yeah, very much, if you're going to play a fantasy game, you're either going to play Dragon Quest or Final Fantasy VII. It's been that way for years, and that's kind of crazy. We barely get a little bit of revolutionary elements in the sense of Destiny games kind of revolutionizing like Halo games, but kind of barely at that. But yeah, video games being based on technology should be a lot more revolutionary in their stories and appearance and features, and they just aren't, unfortunately. Evil Empire is seeking alpha testers for the Rogue Prince of Persia. Interesting that they're looking for alpha testers. That makes me wonder if they have very little funding, and that maybe they spent way too much of their funding just licensing Prince of Persia from Ubisoft. It would be weird if this game came out and it was actually good, and yet it still failed because it just couldn't advertise itself well enough. We'll see what happens, I guess. Magnum raids are coming to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet this weekend. Major Palworld update is coming this summer, with Arena set to launch later this year. Pocket Pair has also released a patch targeting Xbox save issues. Nintendo has added 3 more games to the Switch Online Super NES library. The latest Final Fantasy VII Rebirth update fixes its Platinum Trophy bug. Baldur's Gate 3 wins Best Game at the 2024 BAFTA Game Awards. Naraka Blade Point Season 12 Tenacity is now live. I did not realize Naraka Blade Point had seasons. I guess that explains why it's so popular. Kingdom Come Deliverance developer Warhorse Studios is going to reveal its new game next week. This is a really short article, even for GameDeveloper.com. 1 sentence, 2 sentences, 3 sentences, double spacing between each sentence, linked to a tweet that doesn't even work for me. Todd Howard keeps saying no to an Elder Scrolls TV show. Amazon's Fallout show has been renewed for a 2nd season. Why would Todd Howard say no to one and yes to the other? That's an interesting question. The only thing I could assume here is because Fallout 4 has come out, Fallout 76 has come out, and so there's been recent Fallout games that could enjoy extra sales from having a TV show spin-off, whereas there has not been an Elder Scrolls game that has been recently released. In fact, the most recent Elder Scrolls game was probably either an update to Elder Scrolls Online or a mobile game that came and went. It might also be a case that Todd Howard maybe just cares about the Elder Scrolls series way more than he does the Fallout series, as far as keeping the narrative together. An Elder Scrolls game almost certainly feels like it would be a bigger budget Game of Thrones story, where a Fallout TV show can be a smaller story with fewer characters and smaller budget. Because you kind of expect a giant war at some point in an Elder Scrolls game between 2 major factions, and you don't really expect that in a Fallout game or a Fallout TV show. The bigger question here is, why is Todd Howard still in charge at all? That is the elephant in the room, is that why is Todd Howard in charge when Todd Howard as a name really should just be a figurehead they throw out there every now and then, but not actually making any decisions, because his decisions have not been well received or profitable really in the past decade at least. Why is it not Phil Spencer who's saying no to Elder Scrolls TV show? Yeah, and maybe we will see Phil Spencer say we're going to say yes to that anyways. inherently, I would think Phil Spencer would be foaming at the mouth to sell every single license they can to TV shows from every single company they have. And a lot of their games might make sense that way. Frankly, they could probably have TV shows coming out before the games are even released. That vampire game that came out to no avail and no interest, had there been a TV show that had done a full season before that, some kind of cartoon or something, maybe that would have set a better foundation for the vampire game when it actually released. Personally, I think that it should be the other way around, that you would potentially write a comic book or a novel first, because those would be the cheapest way to develop an idea. Then you would turn it into a cartoon. Then you would, or live action TV series. Then you would turn it into a video game, where the video game is inherently going to take more time to develop and more budget. In the same way that you see a lot of anime starting off as a manga in black and white, just animated as cheaply as possible, and then it gets turned into a TV anime series, and then if it's really popular, it will be turned into a movie anime spin-off series or a remake. And then usually if it's popular enough as an anime series, it might also get some live action TV series that are fairly low budget but still make extra money for it. And then eventually you'll have a video game based off of an anime come out, but the video game isn't usually an afterthought to make more money too, so it's perhaps not a direct path as much as it gets to be made as a TV movie or anime, and then it branches off to a lot of spin-offs to try and make extra cash. Anyways, moving on. Fallout 3 and New Vegas are free for Prime members for the next 6 months. So, the question here, I guess, is under which launcher? It's Amazon Luna's platform. So you're not getting a Steam code for it or an Epic Game Store code for it. You have to go through Amazon Luna, which I'm surprised Amazon Luna's still a thing. But yeah. Fallout 4's delayed current gen upgrade is coming this month. Next week's free Epic Game Store titles have been announced. It's the game The Big Con and Town of Salem 2. I guess this one's The Big Con. Doesn't really matter to me. I still can't claim any of the games. Something about the Epic Game Store is just broken for me. Probably my security that I run on my network. But the security I run on my network works 99.9% of the time otherwise. Pac-Man Mega Tunnel Battle Chomp Champs has been dated for console and PC. This apparently is a new thing. It's a 64-player match game, so it's like Pac-Man 99 in thought, but only 64 players, which is probably more manageable. Honestly, the 99 concept is too high. I don't think most players really want to be competing against 99 players. It makes a lot more sense if it was 30 players at most. Like the thought that you could win 1 out of every 30 games on average feels a lot better than winning 1 out of every 100 games on average, which in reality your win ratio is going to be much lower than that unless you're really good at the game. Moving on. Xbox's April console update is rolling out to all players. The Xbox app for PC has also been updated. So what was in this console update? It adds a new functionality to Discord, letting players disable certain effects using a toggle. It adds a new notification that lets players knows if their OneDrive is running low on space. Yeah, I'm sure nobody wanted that other than Microsoft. adds a new restriction allowing users to block which devices can be used to install and uninstall games too. This essentially means if enabled, only a primary account user can install or delete content. I could see a situation where that would be helpful. Game hubs will be rolled out across the Xbox app for PC to all players. The UI change allows players to track progress like achievements, time played, and other in-game metrics. You'll also be able to see your friends' activity and stats from this page. New content for games like DLC releases will be highlighted here too. That games company Sky's Children of the Light is now available on PC. Yep, I saw that on Steam. Let's see, if I click Steam here, it's just going to take me to a link to Steam. Immortals of Avium Studio has reportedly furloughed the majority of its staff. Let's see. We already kind of talked about that in the last stream. Command & Conquer Storms March's European sales chart after Steam release. Dragon Dogma 2 was the highest new entry at number 3. So, there's not a game called Command & Conquer Storms. It is Command & Conquer Games taking the top charts in Europe. Let's see, Red Alert, Renegade, Tiberian Sun, Red Alert 2, and Generals, which I'm surprised Generals is higher. I don't think I've played Generals. I played probably Red Alert 1 and Red Alert 2, and I'm not even sure you really need to play all of these games. In modern times, it's kind of hard to know if you really need to play any of them at all. You still see in Europe, though, that EA Sports Football Club 24 is selling as number 1, and Helldivers 2 is making Sony a lot of money. So it seems like there might just be a high level of nostalgia around Command & Conquer in Europe, in the UK. Nope, this is Europe, not the UK. You would think maybe in these uncertain times in Europe, they wouldn't want to play military real-time strategy games, even though Red Alert series is pretty fantasy-based. But I guess in honesty, Europe is always very close to or from a war anyways, Europe being such a big conglomeration of countries. I don't know if you can call Europe a continent, per se, even. Anyways, moving on. All Apex Legends players have been offered free Apex packs following account issues. EA Motive was reportedly hoping to make a brand new Dead Space game. Another report claims the franchise is on hold after disappointing sales of last year's remake. So I wonder if perhaps what the disagreement here is maybe that EA just never announced a Dead Space 2 or never told EA Motive that they were going to be making a Dead Space 2. So when somebody says that the franchise is on hold, maybe that's not factually accurate because it was already on hold. Again, they're saying a second report has claimed that Dead Space franchise is on hold. That second report is the Bloomberg source, which we read at the beginning of the stream, which really was just repeating what the Giant Bomb Jeff Grubb source was saying and quoting Giant Bomb. So there aren't really two reports as far as I can tell, unless I'm misreading the Bloomberg source. So yeah, and this time it's GameDeveloper.com saying that instead of VideoGamesChronicle.com saying it instead of GameDeveloper.com. saying it, which doesn't mean anything, because I'm sure there's a myriad of mainstream video game journalism sites that very quickly just copy each other and don't actually research what they're saying at all and don't care if they are propagating fake news or inaccurate information at the very least. Vampire Survivors PlayStation release and Contra themed DLC has been announced. There's also a Castlevania V Rising announcement that's separate. A Prince of Persia roguelite from Dead Cells studio Evil Empire has been announced. Interesting. So this is part of the story I didn't really catch, is that this is from the studio that made Dead Cells, which there's been some small controversy in the fact that they've given up on supporting Dead Cells. Although the Dead Cells studio might actually have given up on Dead Cells quite a long time ago and given it to a different company, which has then once again given up on Dead Cells. But Dead Cells certainly got a lot of support anyways. And it certainly would be interesting if the Rogue Prince of Persia played a lot like Dead Cells and is just Dead Cells with a Prince of Persia coat of paint on it. That would be interesting if that's what it turned out to be, at least. It has a good chance that it won't turn out that way, though. And it will be a different kind of game. Prince of Persia is not really a game that's known for having a whole bunch of different attack patterns and weapons, where Dead Cells was all about that. Pocket Pair teases Palworld Arena player versus player mode. Slay the Spire 2 has been announced. I have not gotten back to playing Hand of Fate 2, but I definitely question if maybe I'm on the wrong side of the games, of the two games, and should be playing Slay the Spire 1 at this point instead. Anyways, moving on. EA is raising the price of its EA Play subscription. Dead Space 2 remake reportedly shelved following lackluster sales of the first game. The update here, Motive was reportedly hoping to make a brand new Dead Space game rather than another remake. So maybe that's the disagreement here, is that they wanted to make a whole new game, not just another remake. And maybe EA came back and is disputing the lackluster sales part of this. See, the update 2 here says, Motive was reportedly hoping to make a brand new Dead Space game rather than another remake before EA put the franchise on hold again. That's apparently how they're updating the story. I don't know if a new Dead Space 2 was really needed. I think they could have probably just remade Dead Space 2. They definitely would have to make a new Dead Space 3. Anyways, so that brings us to the Gematsu articles, and I think what I'm gonna do is pause the recording and take just a little bit of a break. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. So, we were going to go through the Gamatsu articles now, headlines, and see if there's any new information. It's been a particularly slow week this week, anyways, as far as video game news goes. We really haven't gotten any major announcements, which puts me in this weird position where I don't really have a lot of room to be super hyped about anything at the moment. Like Stellar Blade, yes, obviously you can be super hyped about that, but it's hard to believe that people are just going to be all about Stellar Blade for weeks or months with no competition at all. It may just become that is the fact, and Shift Up may just get really, really lucky with its release schedule. But yeah, I definitely feel like maybe Sea of Thieves thought it was going to be better received, and maybe it will be, but I doubt it. It would be an interesting time, certainly, if Nintendo came out and released the Switch 2 very early, all of a sudden, or Nintendo or some other Microsoft or Sony came out with a secret game in their back pocket. It's kind of crazy that these companies don't have a game in their back pocket at all times to release on a slow release week, but they obviously don't. Anyways, headlines. Stellar Blade Developer Diary Episode 1, The Journey. Let's see, what would be, I guess, kind of interesting to watch this is to see, in general, if this is going to show any of the actual developers, or if this isn't just all going to be teaser game images. There we have the director being shown here, but this is all extremely highly polished compared to other presentations we've seen where people often are just sitting around tables talking about the game. I'm seeing a lot of enemies here I haven't seen before. So, yep, there's a question certainly here as far as how successful this Korean game will become and how successful Shift Up as a Korean company may become. It would be weird, to say the least, if Stellar Blade sold a massive amount and yet Sony decided not to be involved with Shift Up any further, and nobody else decided to be involved with Shift Up any further as far as being publishers to their games. But it's kind of believable that might happen. I could see Sony being irked that a Korean company might be that successful and they may want to not publish it, or Sony being more censorious. It does still feel weird that Stellar Blade is releasing on the PlayStation, the one console that has been all about censoring before in most recent times. But I guess that was during the time of Jim Ryan, and so this might be different. It's interesting, 3D photography around a model wearing an outfit. Maybe that's how they get the unique outfit looks. Although in fairness, Stellar Blade's outfits are all these skin-tight latex outfits, not the outfit they were actually photographing there. What I'm mostly trying to see here is if somewhere in the background we see a picture of Nikkei, Goddess of Victory, or even Destiny Child, the first two games from Shift Up. I imagine the answer will be no. And yeah, without listening to the audio, watching this developer diary doesn't mean too much. They're nice looking offices, so perhaps a little dark. Yeah, if only I had extra time, I'd actually sit through all of that and listen to it. But I'll never have time to do that. It's questionable if I'll ever get around to even playing Stellar Blade in a reasonable amount of time. Yeah, since it's a PS5 exclusive, I think right now, it very possibly would be years, if maybe never, that it would come to PC or other consoles. So there is also a scenario that Stellar Blade sells really well for the PS5, and yet Sony still doesn't want to do a second deal with Shift Up to publish their next game. And then Sony has the ownership of Stellar Blade under contract so that they would never release it to other consoles or PC. So it might just be like Heavenly Sword, in the sense that there's a game out there, like Stellar Blade could be a game that would just be exclusive to PlayStation and never go to any other platform. Although at a certain level, if Stellar Blade did get locked down to PlayStation, I feel like Shift Up could make a different game story and a different game series and learn from the growing pains of making their first 3D game, console game, their first 3D and first console game, and probably make even a better product the second time around. Anyways, moving on. Genshin Impact version 4.6 update, Two Worlds of Flame, The Crimson Knight Fades, launches April 24th. This visuals looks a little bit different from what you normally see from Genshin Impact. I assume people are still playing Genshin Impact. But I also assume that the 4.6 version means that they probably have been around for 4.5 years. That feels about right. With no signs of really slowing down. Gio Corsi joins Nintendo of America's AAA third-party game portfolio management team. Visions of Mana, Continue Your Life with Mana special trailer is available. So I assume this is a game that's going to come out at some point in the future. Clap Hands announces Ultimate Swing Golf for Quest 2 and 3. So it's a VR golfing game of some sort. Very possibly a joke golfing game. SNES Nintendo Switch Online adding Amazing Hibarike, Super R-Type, and Wrecking Crew 98. Two of these games I don't recognize. First of all, Wrecking Crew 98 is weird. Alright. Amazing Hibiriki is probably how it's pronounced. It was developed by Sunsoft and originally released on the Super Famicom. Chaotic battles in single player mode are up to 4 players. In versus mode, select your character, then tussle on stages littered with items and traps to make use of or fall victim to unless you unleash your character's special attack and try to be the last one standing. Sounds almost like a prototype for Smash Brothers. And then Wrecking Crew, Mario picks up the Wrecking Crew hammer in this action puzzler previously only available in Japan. So I don't like to watch Nintendo announcement videos, but in this case I'm going to make an exception. Just so I can get a general idea of how this plays. It doesn't have the platforms as much as Smash Bros. Would, but yeah, it is somewhat prototypical to Smash Bros. Knocking people off the edges and fighting. Super R-Type, no real question on what that is. It's an R-Type side-scrolling shooter. Wrecking Crew seems to be a competitive puzzle Tetris type game. Okay. Seems like the Japanese version also is getting a Battletoads game on top of that. And I don't know if this really is Hibiki again or if this is a different game. Yeah. If I don't recognize Wrecking Crew 98, which implies there might have been a different Wrecking Crew, that tells me that there's very possibly other games that Mario was shoveled into that I'm unaware of, which, in fairness, that's a good assumption to make. They crammed Mario into a lot of games, particularly Game Boy games. I could see there being 2 or 3 games that star Mario's, Mario Tennis type games, Mario Golf type games that I couldn't actually name. And I could see those getting re-released for Super NES even, or being released on Super NES and Game Boy or something like that. I guess it's time to move on now. Deep Silver and Warhorse Studios to announce Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 on April 18th. We are very much getting announcements for announcements in that case. We're not even getting that many announcements for announcements. Shin Megami Tensei 5 Vengeance details new Nohumbi no form, new demons, and Da'at exploration, and more. The visuals for Shin Megami Tensei still make me question whether I'd ever really want to play the game. Like, I like the monster concept creations well enough, but the main character, I just kind of question whether I could stand looking at him that often. It is all very much some crazy characters, demons, devils, made up from a Japanese perspective and from a specific Japanese creator's imagination. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else I've ever seen around this series that made me feel like I would want to put the amount of time into it. Seems like there's a lot of running around. Remember, Shin Megami Tensei went out of its way to have a new demon creature depicted and advertised for what felt like at least 100 days before it was released. So them introducing new demon characters is not that, shouldn't be that interesting, really. Wrath Aeon of Ruin for the PS4 and 5, Xbox One and Series, and Switch launches April 25th. It's first launched on Steam in 2019, it looks like. Oh, that says 2024. It's mostly positive first-person shooter, but I'm not sure I could ever justify playing a first-person shooter. Remnant 2 DLC, The Forgotten Kingdom, launches April 23rd. Fallout 4 Next Gen Update launches April 25th. Pixel art side-scrolling puzzle platformer Nanuka Secret of the Shattering Moon has been announced for consoles and PC. It's due out in 2025. Monster Jam Showdown launches August 29th. says here, pre-order for 3 days of early access. Sid Alpha did a whole video talking about how the latest Ubisoft Star Wars game is charging a lot of money for not a lot of reward, and one of the rewards that they are charging extra money for is to have 3 days early access. So you're paying extra to play the worst version of the game that's inherently going to be patched, is one thing he said. It was a video worth watching, I imagine, just to remind us all that buying these expensive versions is really, obviously, and has always been a ripoff. Pac-Man Mega Tunnel Battle Chomp Champs launches May 9th. Here we can see what the game looks like somewhat, in that you have just a lot of connected different levels of Pac-Man. Sunny Side launches May 24th for PC and July 10th for PS5 and Xbox Series. It's a fairly wide difference in release times. Weirdly, this is a game that I don't think I've seen before. If any of the images are going to actually load. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Half visual novel in its appearance, but seems to be more of a farming sim, almost RPG game. Seems to be a little bit of everything, which is a little scary. There may just be too much going on. If anything, I kind of describe this as almost like a Persona game if Persona had fewer people and was more about farming. Weirdly, this says it was updated last December 9th, 2022, so has this game secretly been on Steam's database that long, for 2 years? It's possible. Well, this is a little interesting, I would say. It looks a little different, feels a little different. Famitsu sales from 4.1 to 4.7 have been updated on Komatsu. Let's see, Princess Peach Showtime still in the #1 spot. So, overall you've got like 20,000 sales this week, and somehow that has been 124,000 overall. Which the numbers would have to get up pretty high to beat like Mario Kart 8, but I don't think they're at that point. Nintendo Switch all the way down till the 14th spot, with the exception of the 3rd spot with Rise of Ronin. Then it is Dragon's Dogma 2 and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. And then more Nintendo Switch games all the way down. What's interesting here is not a single game here is labeled as new. So it seems like there was no new game at all. Hardware sales still seem to be amazingly high for the Switch OLED model at least, and not even half as high for the PlayStation 5. Series X is actually selling pretty good this week. And for the first time, I think ever, we finally have the chart saying that there is no Nintendo new 2DS XLs being sold this week. They have finally stopped either reporting on that, because they were selling like 5 or 6 units every week. Which in fairness, PlayStation 4 only sold 107 units in Japan. The population of Japan apparently dropped about 500,000 compared to last year also, so it's just getting a smaller and smaller populace overall. But yeah, March today is the first time I've ever seen them stop reporting on the new 2DS sales. Anyways, moving on. A romance visual novel, Koi ni wa Amai ga Hitsuyuo or Uoe Desu is coming to the Switch on August 8th in Japan. I don't think I pronounced that quite right. I'm pretty sure I didn't. It's been a while since we've even seen the otome and the romance visual novels being announced. It's been a slow point, because slow season. And I certainly wouldn't suspect that you would see any real slowdown in visual novels getting released on the Nintendo Switch. I would imagine visual novels will get released on the Switch years after the Switch 2 gets released. It's already been released on PC, but I guess not Steam. And visuals here don't show me much of anything other than there is some weirdness here where it looks like this girl is this girl, but then this girl has blue hair, and this girl looks like this girl, but then this girl has pink hair. So they tend not to change hair colors in anime style shows, but whatever. Classic action platformer Revival Beyond the Ice Palace 2 has been announced for all consoles and PC. Let's see. What do you mean by a classic action platformer? To me, that looks like a Castlevania game. Maybe that is the generic thing to say when you're talking about something that's a Castlevania inspired game. Which, in fairness, it's not like they're making new Castlevania games, so ripping it off is a decent thought. Sunsoft is back. Retro Game Selection launches April 18th in Japan for Switch and PC. Although, in fairness, it's not like Castlevania really should have a monopoly on action platformers or even Dracula games. So these screenshots are doing a very poor job of really telling me what to expect from these Sunsoft games. So yeah, these are really old. I don't know if these were supposed to be Famicom games. They don't seem like they're the right resolution regardless. And if you're seeing rewinding, almost certainly there's some emulation running it in the background. These games are just so old, I just can't imagine that there's any way any of them would be relevant to play if you don't have any nostalgia for them. And I don't think anybody in the West is going to have nostalgia for them because it doesn't seem like they support English. So I have to just move on. Idea teases Tenchi no Uta revival project. Ubisoft and Evil Empire announced the Rogue Prince of Persia for PC. V Rising DLC Legacy of Castlevania gameplay trailer and details. I think we may end up going through all the headlines from the AAA initiative today. So yeah, this might be fairly redundant. Apologies if it is. Mouse Spike D gameplay teaser trailer and screenshots. This was the one game that was announced that I thought would get more coverage and more people would talk about it, but it doesn't seem like that really happened. I did watch somebody else watch the III Initiative presentation, and it really was just trailer after trailer after trailer. Sometimes it would say like world premiere before it, but there was no presenter, there was no fluff, there was no awards or anything like that. So it felt like it very easily could have been an overwhelming experience if you were really hyped about games, and that a lot of people might just move up to a point where they see one trailer that they feel super hyped about, and then they would lose interest and not watch it all the way to the end. It did feel like it was just a lot of trailers, and maybe that's why they were trying to just show trailer after trailers to save some time. But it felt like it was all rising action when there could have been room for some falling action, for a presenter to come out and talk for a while so you can feel safe to take a bathroom break or just take a breather, go get a sandwich, things like that. Even if that presenter was just going to come back and talk about a game that had already been released, or talk about the development of a game that had already been released. That would have been helpful to just do something different. It's not great to do the same thing over and over again. Ironically, I'm saying this as I feel like a lot of times when I make content, I'm doing the same thing over and over again. That being said, I'll leave that thought there. I did want to see this get hyped a little bit more. That being said, also, I don't remember most of the other games announced from the III Initiative because it was all just one big blob of announcements. They probably should spread it out to multiple nights over the week of announcements or something like that. Still make it feel like a big event, but do it over a weekend, do it over a week. Spread it out over a couple different presentations. 33 Immortals closed beta test set for May 24th to June 2nd. Palworld Arena update has been announced. Tchia for Switch launches June 27th. Rotato DLC Abyssal Terrors and free local co-op update announced. Let's School is coming to the PS4 and 5, the Xbox One and Series, and Switch this summer. The visuals for this game, Let's School, kind of feel like they're all over the place. It looks like it's a school simulator management game, but the trailer had some weirdness in what it was showing. Yeah. Maybe I can't particularly highlight it as well with these screenshots. Wizard of Legend 2 combat trailer is available on Gematsu. Lasaria Summit Kingdom is now available in early access. It's a pure city building experience, is what they call it. I don't know what the difference between regular city building and pure city building is. This Summit Kingdom feels very Tibetan influenced, which may lead to a different type of architecture and city design, certainly. Building on a mountain summit. The Last Spell DLC, Dwarves of Runeberg, has been announced. Which I guess The Last Spell is a game. Hyper Light Breaker launches in early access this summer. This is the sequel to Hyper Light Drifter. They didn't do the best job, I think, of explaining that. And it would be easy to not immediately make that connection. Cat Quest 3 has an opening animation on Gematsu. Single-player 3D platformer RKGK, or Rakugaki, has been announced for PC. This is I believe, skateboarding and spray painting type experience. Not perhaps skateboarding, maybe Heeley skates, or maybe just running and spray painting. It looks visually busy, to say the least. So I might be a little bit cautious on that game, just having too much on the screen at one time. Darkest Dungeon 2 to add Kingdoms mode in 2024. They showed the trailer of what Kingdoms mode is, but I don't know if they really explained what it looked like. It seemed to me like it was just a slightly different way to play. In the most recent 30 days, it's only at 69% positive. It's at overall 75% positive. And honestly, at this point, I can just take Darkest Dungeon 2 off my wishlist, follow list. I don't think, having not really enjoyed the experience of Darkest Dungeon 1, because it's just never gets easier for that final run, and spent way too much time playing Darkest Dungeon 1. I just don't think I want to take that journey a second time, with a Kingdoms mode or not. Now, people that did like Darkest Dungeon 1, I'm sure still like Darkest Dungeon 2, and I would assume they would be willing to try Kingdoms mode at least. But yeah, that just wasn't my experience. What the Car for PC launches September 5th. This is a weirdo game that I think may have been an Apple Arcade game originally. Don't hold me to that. Yeah, it was an Apple Arcade game first. Medieval Kingdom Simulator game Norland launches in early access on May 16th. Norland might be a great example of a game that maybe doesn't deserve to be in early access. I don't think any of the games should be in early access, but in particular, with such a drought in games, launching in early access just exacerbates the problems with game releases these days. Undermine 2 has been announced for PC. The question here certainly is, what was Undermine 1? Let's see, can we get a link to Undermine 1? Why is the recommendation engine so terrible about not recommending the first games in series? You're saying it's like Binding of Isaac. Well, I could see that being interesting then. Undermine 1 is closer to a Zelda game, I would say, but maybe Binding of Isaac is not too far from a Zelda game itself. It's rated very positively. It's been only on sale for $4.99 at most. So maybe I should buy that game and give it a try. Although, in fairness, I probably should just finish playing Binding of Isaac Rebirth with the next bit of DLC, and then get the final bit of DLC that's available at this point, and play more Binding of Isaac first. Well, regardless, it seems like the outfits maybe have changed to be less Zelda-like. The visuals here don't really scream Zelda on this image. Alright, well, moving on. In Zone 2 launches in early access this summer. Never Alone 2 has been announced for PC. go ahead and put that on the fall list. Yeah, I didn't really love Never Alone 1, but honestly, there's literally only one other First Nations Native American game, and that's Never Alone 1, so might as well give it a chance. At least follow it. Vampire Survivors is coming to PS5 and PS4 this summer, and the DLC Operation Guns featuring Contra has been announced. Gestalt, Steam, and Cinder for PC launches May 21st. This is another one of those games where it feels like I should have seen this before, and yet it's not on the fall list, and it seems like somehow I just missed it. Which I always get concerned when I see that. It makes me wonder how many other games I've missed despite my best efforts. Dino Lord's teaser trailer is available on Gematsu. Alright, and so that's gonna bring us to the GameDeveloper.com articles, which are still broken, and we've talked about, I think, all of them. Let's see if there's anything here that we haven't talked about. Koei Tecmo sues mobile developer Yuzu for repeated copyright infringement. Interesting. Let's read that article. I think that's pretty much it. Let's jump over and read that article first. Koei Tecmo claims, despite numerous cease and desists, that Yuzu kept using material from its game to advertise its own mobile titles. Interesting. Which, that probably highlights where the threat of a cease and desist is literally just a threat. I don't think it even helps you in court cases or judgments, really. It might prove that they knowingly infringed if they are infringing in the first place. Of course, this is a Singaporean developer being sued by Koei Tecmo, a Japanese company, so who knows what the laws. They're claiming that Yuzu used music and in-game assets from the former's Nobunaga's Ambition and Taiko Rishiden series in online ads for its own mobile games, despite multiple notices sent. This has allegedly gone on for years. It's further claimed the ads refer to Koei Tecmo by name, even though the two companies aren't involved with each other. We have determined that the defendant's conduct is not only detrimental to users and our partner companies, but also undermines the efforts of all parties who were involved in the development of the game. Yuzu is best known for phone titles like League of Angels. It's recently started putting games out in Japan, which per automation share many similarities to Koei Tecmo's historical fantasy games. Lawsuits over alleged clone games are fairly common, at least as it concerns international companies. In 2022, for example, Riot sued NetEase over alleged Valorant clone named Hyperfront and was subsequently shut down months later. PUBG developer Krafton also took NetEase to court over two games, Knives Out and Rules of Survival, which it claimed breached a previous agreement and copied the popular shooter. The two companies settled at the end of 2023. Krafton similarly sued Singaporean studio Garena over its Free Fire game being an alleged PUBG clone. While it's been pulled from India for security concerns, it's still playable in other regions. It felt like a slightly different story if I vaguely recall, whereas PUBG's complaint around PUBG clones felt weaker because PUBG itself is very much just a random Fortnite type game where you have guns and people running around, things that aren't that unique and probably shouldn't even be copyrightable at this point. Unless they're copying the exact 3D models, the exact music, the exact audio, the exact story. Obviously, that level of copying is probably unacceptable by most. But yeah. It'll be interesting to see if this story goes any further. It probably won't. It's also very much a case where it is very much, it feels like it's very much a Wild West in Asia. It's different Asian countries with different laws and not really caring about other Asian countries' laws and copyright. And copyright in Japan, from Koei Tecmo's perspective, is way stricter than it is in a lot of other places. Alright, well, that's going to be it for this stream. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, and keep on watching. Thanks.